As you know, this is photojournalism, and that is my introduction because I'd like to hand it over to Rick to get us going and do the rest of the introduction. So thank you again for being here. We really appreciate you coming to the talk and coming to the show, and we hope you enjoy everything that you see and hear. Thank you so much.
I reached out to each of these photographers before tonight, and I told Giles that I hated him because every one of them, we could easily spend an hour looking at their work and talking about not only their pictures, but their careers and how their careers have changed over the years. Because some of them started in the world of photography. I guess all three of you actually started in the world of negatives and film and then transitioned to digital. So I realize a lot of you know why you're here, but I thought I would just take a minute and just read a little background of each of them before we start. The other thing that was really difficult and challenging for me is that I want to give each of them time, but I also wanted to sort of create a body of work for each of them. So I'm going to show their work, but I don't want to just talk about their photographs, but I want to talk about their lives. Actually, we're going to be looking at the pictures here because there's a big Sony screen over there.
Oh, okay.
So,
But they won't be yours.
yeah, this is our monitor here. So I'll start with Giles. Giles Clarke is a UK-born visual storyteller focused on conflict, displacement, and survival, documenting how people endure life under constant threat. He began in West Berlin in the 1980s as a television news camera assistant during the final years of the Cold War. In London and the United States, he trained in traditional darkroom practice and later printed in New York for Richard Avedon, shaping a disciplined approach to light and narrative. Clarke has since focused on underreported conflicts and fragile environments, working in some of the world's most volatile and dangerous regions, including Sudan, Somalia, Libya, Iraq, and Syria. His work examines the human cost of war beyond the front lines, with an emphasis on displacement, resource scarcity, and the long-term consequences of conflict. Grounded in the belief that bearing witness entails responsibility, his practice centers on the realities of daily life in crisis zones, with a focus on dignity, resilience, and survival. Shelby Lee Adams, on the end, is unique amongst documentary photographers because he works with only one community and has been doing so for over 40 years. Every summer between 1974 and 2010, Shelby Lee Adams traveled to the mountains of eastern Kentucky to take photographs. His annual summer trips allowed him to renew and relive his childhood in these mountains. He began by taking photographs of his grandparents, uncles and aunts, and neighbors and friends. He then asked for introductions when he brought back photographs to distribute those to whose portraits he had taken. Introductions led to further introductions, and over the course of 4 decades, he continued to work in this manner, photographing 3, 4, or sometimes even 5 generations of the same families. Adams' subjects almost unanimously support his work and assent to it to such an extent that he's been able to continue his photography for 3 decades. Yet his work generates extreme levels of controversy, both in Kentucky and outside of it. And then finally, Ron Haviv in the middle is an Emmy-nominated filmmaker, award-winning photojournalist, and co-founder of the photo agency 7, dedicated to documenting conflict and raising human rights issues around the globe. Ron has produced an unflinching record of the injustices of war, covering over 25 conflicts, and his photographs have had a singular impact. His work in the Balkans, which spanned over a decade of conflict, was used as evidence to indict and convict war criminals at the International Tribunal in The Hague. President George H.W. Bush cited Haviv's chilling photographs documenting paramilitary violence in Panama as one of the reasons for the 1989 American intervention. Ron is also the central character in 6 documentary films, including National Geographic's Explorer, Freelance in a World of Risk, in which he speaks about the dangers of combat photography, including his numerous detentions and close calls. So enough talking. I'm going to show some photographs first, starting with Giles. And as I said, it was incredibly difficult to narrow these down. I just pressed the button and nothing happened. There we go. I'm just going to let you experience some of his pictures, and Giles, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, this was from last week, in that last shot.
Previous picture,
Congo.
and go back. That was just last week.
Yeah, and she's got some keys here. She was about to move into a new house, and And so, yeah, last week.
So I've narrowed your pictures down to just a few representing each of these places.
Okay, so now we're in Yemen, 2017. This boy here was on the deathbed, and I followed actually this story for 2 years, and I was lucky to be able to get back about 2.5 years later and see his first ever steps. So this was a happy ending here. This was a picture that was used actually by Bernie Sanders in the US Senate to highlight the American involvement in why are we in this war, why are we supporting this war.
Actually, we could let Bernie tell us the story himself.
Oh.
So let me do that.
Okay.
Do you think the war in Yemen makes sense? That's fine. Come down here on the floor, tell us why you feel that way, tell the American people, tell your constituents why you think it is a good idea to a Republican president, a Democratic president. Enough is enough. Listen to the Constitution. The founding fathers of this country were amazingly smart on this issue. And they understood that before we send our young men and now women off into war to die, to get maimed, there better well be a very good reason that we have to explain to the people who elected us, not just somebody sitting up there in the Oval Office. And that is why the authority for going to war is vested in the representatives of the people who were elected for 2 years or elected.
It's amazingly appropriate right now. I mean, I think one of the questions that I want to ask each of the photographers as we go through this conversation is, do you feel like your pictures have made a difference? And obviously in this case, it's very clear that having Bernie Sanders hold this up in front of Congress made a difference. As I was looking through Giles' work, there were so many stories that we shared a few months ago when we were both in charge together in the UAE, and one of them was an area that you weren't supposed to photograph. Can you tell very quickly how you got into this situation? And we're gonna expand out as you see these pictures.
Yeah, I was in El Salvador for the Observer newspaper doing a story on rehabilitated gang members in 2013. And this was a time when the violence was really extreme between the two gangs, the M23 and the M18. And I just didn't have any sort of pictures of I had the rehabilitated gang members, but I didn't have the other side of it, like the raw side of it. So I stuck around after the writer went home. And I got to a town, and in this town, there was a police captain who I spent a week with before he eventually said to me, I've got something in the back I need to show you. And it was this 3 cages, the 2 gang cages, suspected. So that's the view I saw first when I walked in. And I had no idea that, but he'd said to me, he said, you can see it, but you can't bring your camera. And I said, well, I'm not going in if I can't bring my camera. And there's this whole thing. And in the end, he let me take a little Sony Nex 7, a tiny little thing. And that's what I got.
And didn't you have to, at one point he said, we have to get out of here right now because somebody else is coming in?
Yeah, well, then the word got out that I was in there because some of the other guards, and so I had to be whistled out around the side because the Central Police Force from San Salvador were coming. Yeah, I got taken to the airport. I got taken to a hotel, and my bags were picked up from my other hotel, then straight to the airport.
Just to get out of town quickly.
Yeah. Haiti 2025, this is 5 days before. I got a call from my fixer. It's the thing is, you make these long-term, I've been working in Haiti for 15 years, but my fixer called me 5 days before I took this picture and said, you need to get down here. And he didn't say any more. So this is the barbecue, the guy that 5 days after I took this picture took over the whole airport. He created the overthrow, which is still going on.
This is the idea of trust and how your handlers tell you, not handlers, but your fixers get you into situations, but also tell you when it's time to leave, right?
It's all about access. So you've got to know how to get in and how to.
I love this picture.
Yeah, this was on the back of a motorbike because I drive motorbikes in Haiti. It's just quicker, and they can see you're not armed. So I prefer to be on a bike.
It's actually safer than being in a car, right?
Yeah, I mean it's not that safe to be honest, but it's
safe is a relative term.
Yeah, but it's definitely you're not going to get shot at. Yeah, so Western Somalia, you know, conflict and drought has driven people into these huge camps, and just in staggering numbers, you know. And I've been a number of times there, and I always find myself in these huge places and trying to cover it in a way that it's not too much of a glamorization of suffering, but it's
respectful
also,
to them, but
yeah,
still.
I mean, it's, yeah. So
I'm always amazed all of you have examples of things like even in the middle of this horror, there's this odd beauty. I mean,
well, it can work against you too, because it's, you know, I mean, I mean, Salgado got into trouble for that, for, you know, sort of almost glamorized, you know.
Right, yeah.
Are we taking away the reality of
by making it look pretty.
yeah, so it's the whole thing.
So I'm going to play another quick video here.
US President Trump's freeze on foreign aid could not have come at a worse time for Sudan, a country embroiled in conflict, gripped by famine, and a place where women and girls repeatedly endure sexual violence. As Sudan's civil war soon enters its third year, photojournalist Giles Clarke is documenting the scale of that brutality. And you are looking right now at the portraits of some of the Sudanese women facing mass displacement, photographed by Giles in and around one abandoned classroom. Giles just returned from Sudan and joined me in the studio. I started by asking just how much the humanitarian situation had deteriorated.
And I stopped there, but I mean, again.
Good. I don't like talking on camera. It's just, you know, I mean, she's great, but I'm glad you stopped it there.
I have a personal question, which I'm going to ask each of you, but, you know, as we're looking at these photographs of just it's sort of the worst of humanity, right? I mean, what you're seeing here is just devastation. What do you feel like when you come back here to America, when you've been in these terrible, horrible places where you're seeing children dying and seeing people being slaughtered and people being kept in cages? How do you keep what is your view of humanity after going from one horror to the next?
Yeah, I've stopped editing at night because that would, you know, it's hard. You know, it's not easy. It's particularly tough now because of the polarity and the divergence of just thinking, the acceptance of the horror that's going on, and the translating that. It's difficult to get stories published now on these kind of places.
There are fewer and fewer publications that will even show this work,
and
here
just
especially.
Foreign, you know, stories that maybe are underreported. I tend to go into places where the main TV cameras have gone, so I like to sort of follow up and stuff, and it's just hard to get stuff published, you know. It's frustrating, but you get used to it. You know, you just carry on doing it, you know. I've got a story coming out tomorrow in the Sunday Times, by the way, guys. Just promoting myself shamelessly. And we've taken off the paywall, so Sunday Times UK tomorrow on Sudan.
We'll get to that in just a second.
Okay, sorry.
This is also very recent, right?
Yeah, this was last month in northern Darfur. So I've been waiting. It took me 6 months to get into this with help from the OCHA at the UN. I was able to get as far as 15 miles from El Fasher, which is where the massacre happened last October. So these are just images of 600,000 people displaced in a 10-mile square area. Yeah, it was 16 hours driving from the border, Chad, to here. And yeah, just did my thing.
And you're hired by the UN? You're working for the UN? Who are you working for?
No, they gave me access.
Yeah.
I work out, it's all about, as I said before, it's really, key thing is access. I have other people, campaigns companies who also support me. You need to find other ways now. For us to work in places that I want to work, you've really got to hustle in other areas. No one's going to commission you very few people, and maybe a couple of newspapers. But even then, it's difficult because you've got the rules. So I've had to put as much sort of effort into how to do it, how to pay for it, how to do that, as well as, and then when it's a whole new model now. So Yeah.
It's just enterprising constantly.
Yeah.
Between getting the jobs and then taking the photographs and then finding
It's what it
places
is.
or outlets for
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
I just love this picture. It's not one of the ones you sent me originally, but I
Oh, really?
found it.
Yeah,
I just love the picture.
this area is now completely overrun by militants. It's in northern Burkina Faso in a watering hole near a place called Kaya, and 2019, yeah.
I'm going to turn the next part of our conversation to Shelby. I really enjoyed going through your pictures, and I also love the fact that you've built this long-term relationship with this community. And I want to share some of your pictures, and there's also a little video I'm going to show, just the next one, and then we'll start a little conversation together.
In my photography, I have worked with people in long-term relationships using various field cameras with cameras on a tripod, Polaroid backs, and Kodak film packs, all with multiple lighting sources, sharing and giving my subjects Polaroids in the field, with each exposure taking about 20 seconds to develop. I've always called my Polaroids collaborations, sharing the Polaroids with my subjects and listening to their responses. Keeping a Polaroid or two for myself, leaving several with my subjects, and when I return the next trip, usually 6 months later, I distribute 8x10 and 11x14 inch prints made from the film versions from each shoot. We then photograph again. I've worked in this manner from 1974 through 2010 until the film packs and Polaroid materials were no longer available. Then I've adapted to digital color photography. Here we are viewing a couple sets of Polaroids and the final print compositions. Working in this manner, there are no surprises for my subjects or myself.
One of the things I thought was really interesting about your work was that really, it's just absolutely fascinating. And the fact that you've built a long-term relationship with these people and have watched them, start as children and then become adults and have their own kids. And I'm curious, like your relation, you grew up in this part of the world, is that right?
Sort of. Actually, my father worked in natural gas conversion. So the second grade, I was in Philadelphia. Third grade, I was in Miami Beach, Florida. All through my grade school years was always traveling with my parents. But to finish the school year, I might be seven months in a school in Florida. But I'd always go back home when my father was off of a finished job, and I would go to Hotspot Elementary School, which is where all the poor white people went. Mm-hmm. There's where I really learned my Appalachian people. Then my uncle, as a country doctor, when I was in high school, I would go with him on making house calls.
Wow.
I helped my uncle deliver a baby when I was 16. I decided I'd never touch a woman until I was 18. Anyway, my uncle was very helpful, but my education was kind of diverse. Then I guess I'll just go into it a little bit. 1964, LBJ flew to Kentucky to launch in Inez, Kentucky, the War on Poverty program. That was a couple counties over from where I grew up and where my parents were. After that launched 20 years of journalists and photographers and filmmakers coming into Appalachia. Not always well received, not always understanding the culture and how to approach the people. So that was what I really didn't like photojournalists then at that time.
Right.
They were pretty, they took advantage of people, some did. Later, of course, I fell in love with photography when I went to art school, and then that became my prime subject. In 1968, 67, 68, Robert F. Kennedy came to Appalachia doing research on poverty, and I was in the crowd that on the county courthouse steps and got to shake hands with RFK,
Wow.
which for me was a big deal, still is. And then later, a sort of tragedy happened that my cousin, second cousin, shot and killed a Canadian filmmaker that became an international incident. Yeah. I was in my senior year of high school. And anyone that's taking notes, that film has just been re-released. There was a film made in 2000 called Stranger with a Camera.
Mm. Yeah.
The filmmaker just died recently, like 6 months ago. And so the producer has released the film, and you can now watch it on YouTube. Yeah. Highly recommend it. My cousin went to jail for 1 year for murder. Yeah. And because of sympathy for the local people was very strong and against the media at that time. But that was all fascinating to me, and that sort of spurred me on to become a photographer.
So two things. One is when I first saw this picture, I thought it was just all the dolls and the heads, and then I saw the woman in the mirror and realized it was a portrait of her.
Yeah.
It totally changed the way I saw the photograph. But because of your photographs, you were criticized at one point by, no matter what anybody does, there's going to be critics out there, and people were saying that you were taking pictures that were somehow ridiculing or sort of deliverance, the guys on the bridge, and without understanding that you actually had a relationship with these people that had gone on for decades, right?
The local people, I can honestly say I've carefully respected them and gave them pictures, and when I started making 4x5 Polaroids, I'd give people a Polaroid and say, what do you like or dislike about this picture? Mm-hmm. And I consider that, and how, certainly when I published the picture. I've now done 5 books. I'm working on a 6th book in color digital right now. Anyway, I've always worked showing them the pictures and getting their okay. Mm-hmm. People don't realize, these people look a little strange, a little different. They approve the pictures. They like the pictures. Right. If they didn't like them, I'd redo them till they did like them. As you see the one with the woman with the pipe. See, that was newsprint. I was inspired by Walker Evans in 1939, the Depression era. But I found this house was real. They really still use newsprint to coat their house.
Insulation, yeah.
Anyway, so authenticity is part of what my work's about. Because a lot of things didn't quite get right and done correctly maybe earlier on, even in the Depression era. So my work is historically based on a lot of earlier photographs. But having the love and support of the people has always been important. What you got to understand about Eastern Kentucky, as a lot of Appalachia is, we're all white people, but we're very, very segregated. Economic segregation is what is a major problem in our country. Mm-hmm. It's becoming worse. Yeah. Oh boy, don't get me on that.
Well, some of your defenders or people that supported your work also said that the discomfort people were expressing about your work actually reflected more about their own not wanting to see the fact that there were people in America that were incredibly impoverished, that you were actually shining a light on this, that it made other people uncomfortable, and therefore they were criticizing you.
Yes, it's a part of America. Just like these guys showing the stuff that's going on in Africa or Sudan or everything else. Yeah. We don't want to see that. In Appalachia, we have a lot of millionaires from the coal industry. And they keep the money tight, if you know what I mean. Yeah. They control the money, they control the environment, they control everything. So the poor people are at the bottom of the chain. I'll give you a modern day kind of example, which I probably shouldn't do, but the DJ Vance story about people in Ohio eating dogs and cats and all that crap. That's an old story the Appalachians have told about each other when they get mad. They kill each other's dogs. People love their dogs. They love their pets. You see that in these pictures here. They wouldn't harm a dog. they'd kill someone else before they hurt their dog. Anyway, I'm just trying to say the severity of how things get misinterpreted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to jump over to Ron. I want to leave a little time for Q&A. And again, I'm sorry we're going so fast here. As I said, we could spend an hour with each of these incredibly talented journalists. Ron, I'm going to start with this that you shared with me, which was, I think all of us as photographers, we don't want to just be taking pictures. We want to feel like our pictures actually made a difference and actually had some impact on the world. And here's a little story of how this picture made a big difference.
I absolutely do intervene when there are opportunities to do so and where I feel that I will be able to survive and actually be able to have a positive outcome.
I wanted to ask you about an image from Panama. This, I think, is it the vice president being beaten in the crowd?
This is a photograph that was taken after the dictator of Panama, General Manuel Noriega, had declared that he would hold elections. He then nullified the results. This is a photograph of the vice president being beaten by a Noriega supporter, a paramilitary. When the United States invaded Panama, the president of the United States spoke about the photograph as one of the reasons for the invasion. I'm actually now doing a documentary film called Biography of a Photo, where I'm looking at this photograph from Panama and another one from Bosnia. This was the first documentation of what became referenced as ethnic cleansing. And it's one of the instances where actually there was no way that I can intervene to try to help these people. The paramilitaries that I was with, they were telling me not only not to take any photographs, it was very apparent to me that if I tried something, my life would be in danger. They said that they were liberating this town of Muslim fundamentalists. They started to execute unarmed middle-aged civilians. It was very important for me to make sure that there would be some sort of photographic evidence of this war crime. Through the research we've done so far on Biography of a Photo, really starting to understand the impact of that particular photograph. 25 years later, people are breaking down and crying, saying how emotional they still feel, what this photograph means to them and what it represents. These photographs have become part of the history. That really just shows the power of photography.
So Ron, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and I could have asked any one of the three of this question, is you guys are all doing things that, at least the two of you as, covering these conflicts, put yourself in incredible personal danger. You're watching people here being executed on the street. You said middle-aged, unarmed men and women being just literally executed in front of you. Can you relate it? Can you tell us a story, if you don't mind, of a situation that you were in where you didn't think you were going to make it?
Well, I think probably like Giles, I think there's many of those situations. Luckily, I've never been hurt, and obviously I'm still alive. But certainly many of my colleagues have lost their lives or been seriously wounded trying to tell these stories, and it's always a very difficult situation, and it's increased since I started doing this in 1988, 1989. And it's been becoming progressively more and more dangerous of this idea of trying to control the message. And when I first began in this world of analog film and so on, if you're off with paramilitaries in Yugoslavia or fighters in Rwanda or Congo or wherever in a certain period of time, their chances of them ever seeing the work that you did is very unlikely, right? So you had some sort of a little bit of a barrier, and you also had this somewhat of a belief that you're there to tell their story, so they're going to let you work. Now, today, obviously in the world of digitization, this idea of this wall of protection that exists doesn't. Mm-hmm. And in fact, actually, you pull up to a checkpoint somewhere, the first thing this guy with a gun or this kid with a gun is going to do is they're going to ask your name and they're going to Google you. And they're going to look at the work. Yeah. And if they don't like the work, if you're against their side or something like that, your life becomes very dangerous. And so what this does is adds to this idea, or this consistent idea of trying to control the message. Mm-hmm. So it really kind of shifted quite a while ago in the war in the former Yugoslavia. And a great example of how it shifted was we used to tape press or TV on our vehicles to be able to drive around, and we would be considered observers, nobody would bother us. And as the war progressed and each side got more and more angry as the way that they were represented, we as the media were the targets, and we were also the representatives of the Western governments in their mind and so on. So we no longer could identify ourselves as media. And that has just continued more and more. So now you say close calls, it's always, everything is a close call. Even Giles going to Al-Fashir at a refugee camp or displacement camp, you don't know who's there. The danger is always
Constant.
is always there.
Right. You had a picture that we saw a few minutes ago of all these life rafts, or what do you call it, life preservers on a plane. Can you talk about that picture for a minute?
That was taken in Greece, in Lesbos, Greece. If you guys remember when the migrants in 2015, right, were coming across from Turkey, through Syria and other places. And so they were basically would arrive, they would spend their last pennies and would be given a vest, a life vest, put on a boat that may or may not be able to cross the river or the sea into Greece. And when they would arrive, they would be arrested and taken away by the Greek authorities, and then the boats that brought them would be destroyed, and the life vests, which are this sort of emblem of obviously saving their lives, were kind of tossed into this graveyard of life vests and became very emblematic of what was happening. And one of the amazing things about photography is that you don't always need a person in a photograph. You can have these symbols that illustrate and represent what's going on in a very kind of poignant way.
Yeah, no, the really powerful images. I know that I think all of you, the pictures that all three of you have of children in these situations is really emblematic. And you said here, here's a great example, what you just said.
Yeah, this is from Ukraine. This is basically as the Russians were pushing through in the first few months of the war, they were ethnically cleansing areas. This is from an area called Irpin, and people basically were fleeing. The bridge that was taking them to safety across the river was destroyed, and so you had to kind of maneuver with whatever they could, and that they weren't able to, the family had to leave the stroller behind, because there's no physical way that they could, while under fire, kind of make their way to safety.
Yeah, I love in a lot of your pictures, you have that kind of symbolic feeling of, as you just said a minute ago, nobody's in the picture, but your mind sort of fills in all the blanks. They're almost like Rorschach tests, right? One of the things that I wonder about, and those of you in the audience, I'm sure, that are not war photographers, there's people there that are starving, that have no water. Do you all carry enough food in your backpack for 2 weeks? And what do you do about water? And how do you guys survive in the middle of a place where there's literally millions of people around you not surviving?
Money.
There's
people can be starving, and there could be a market right next door filled with food. Nobody can afford to buy it.
Wow.
So the disparity between what I'm coming with and what these people are living with there's not even a question. So there are times, yes, where you're living like the people, but as Giles, I'm sure, would attest to, we have this luxury, we can always leave. So there's no real, yes, there's danger, and we're arrested, and we're taken prisoner and so on, but we're there to document the stories of these people, and what they're experiencing is nothing like what
Shelby, I think you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I've experienced, how I've experienced it in Appalachia, put it that way. And what I do, which probably isn't the Robert Rules of Order book way to do it, is some families, I know them, and when I repeat coming to see them 6 months later, and I drive a van, and I'll go to the grocery store before I go visit a family and get a bag or two of groceries and take them and give it to the family. Now, a lot of people would say, well, that's compromising or the family. But I find it easier to photograph a family if they've had a few bites to eat, and we make better pictures. And I actually do that when I meet with people, and of course I'm welcome. But I try and help people as I can. What little I can do, it doesn't help a lot in the big picture, I realize. But
it's also an exchange. They're giving you their time, and
It's also one of the hardest things, though, when you're surrounded in a sort of tent area, tent city, when you can't you really can't help one and not. So last Saturday, I was in a place called Sake in the DRC, and it's near Goma. It was the front line 2 years ago when Goma got overrun by the rebels. I was in this town last Saturday, and there was a man there who we were taken to this area in this sort of rundown sort of part of town that had been hit by, it was basically the middle of the conflict. So a few houses had been rebuilt. And this one guy called Claude was living in this house that he'd been given by a NGO that had support from various other areas. And he was living in this house, and he looked scared and really upset. And through a translator, I said, well, you know, you have a new house. And he said he'd said his mother had been killed in the house that was there before. He's now living in it, and because he'd been given this house, he's now being targeted. Everything he had been taken 2 days before. And so, you know, and my initial idea was that, okay, I got to help this guy. But you can't.
It's almost painting a target on his back.
You can't, you just can't do it. And walking away from that is very difficult. Yeah.
So, Ron, I asked Giles this question before, but when you come back from conflict and the things that you've seen, and then you're walking through a shopping mall in New Jersey and you're watching people worrying about a zit on their face or, the fight that they had with their, spouse that morning, which TV show to watch. I remember years ago talking to David Kennerly, who won the Pulitzer Prize when he was 27 years old, and he said when he came back from the front at the end of the day, he felt so alive that he'd made it through another day. He's almost like a weird kind of euphoria. But he said he watched other friends get addicted to that, where they felt numb when they weren't in some situation that was life-threatening to them and other people. Do you experience that? What's it like when you come back from Ukraine, you've been in so many different conflicts? What does that feel like when you're here?
Well, overall, it's obvious we're reasonably lucky. We've obviously had our issues here in the United States or in other places around the world that are outside kind of immediate conflict zones. But at the same time, I think it took me quite a while to understand how to, and a number of girlfriends as well, and how to acclimate myself back to kind of normal life in that a state of war is not my normal life. And that takes some thinking about. But I think that kind of the bigger picture and the kind of morphing that question into kind of a motivation, as an American, many of these conflicts are caused by either current or previous American foreign policy decisions and so on. And so I think therefore, the goal is always to bring these stories back and to ensure that people actually understand, if you vote this way, this can happen. If you donate money to MSF or UNICEF, you can have this kind of impact, and so on. And so that idea of the work actually having impact, aside from kind of the grand president talking about the work or convicting people of war crimes, but even on a different level, a more reasonable level, that the work is part of this conversation that is educating people. And as we hopefully can see today, who you vote for has real impact.
Yeah.
And we should have seen that. And certainly the hope was after 9/11 that people understand that what happens in Afghanistan can affect you in New York City.
Yep.
And I think that the work that we're doing should be this constant reminder of this involvement, and that's a responsibility that I think specifically visual journalism, but journalism as a whole is supposed to play, is supposed to continuously, yes, totally fine, have an argument about the TV show, or where you're having dinner, or worry about your job, which is incredibly important in your life, but also understand the other things that you're doing will have a trickle effect. And how you vote or not vote and so on is not just an arbitrary decision. Many people in the world itself is going to be affected by this.
I have a question about two pictures. I'm going to jump back one for a second. Could you tell us what's going on here? I was really intrigued by this, and then when I read the caption, what it is, it's really interesting.
This is a photograph from the war in Bosnia, which is one of 4 wars that broke up the former Yugoslavia in the 1990s, and is actually probably, I think, the most powerful photograph that I've ever taken. And all it is a photograph of a photograph. This is a photograph of the Fako family. They were Bosnian Muslims living in a suburb of Sarajevo, which was the capital of Bosnia. The war started. The city got split in half. They had to flee. 4 years later, when the war was over and the city was reunified, they went back to their home, which had been occupied by the opposing forces during the course of the war. Everything in the house was gone: electric, plumbing, furniture, nothing was left. All that was left, lying on the floor of the living room, was this family photo. And what it appears is that, it's now a guess, but whoever was living there took a razor blade, etched out their faces, and took a screwdriver and basically drew lines through them. And this is what the idea of ethnic cleansing, genocide, about all the conflicts, certainly that Giles and I have been covering, is all about the identity of the other, how to remove it. And it's all said in this photograph. This is a middle-class family on vacation. It's a family photograph. We all have this picture at home. And this is the idea of one side trying to eliminate the identity.
Well, erase the civilization. We've heard that phrase recently, right?
If you want to bring it to that point,
Yeah. And this picture also is heartbreaking in the story behind it.
So this is also from the Bosnian War. This is a soldier. His name is Senad Madanovic. And at the beginning of the war, he and his family were living in this compound, and they had to flee. They were ethnically cleansed. But many of the family members were killed, and they're actually buried in this front yard. This is 4 years later after that occurred. He joined a unit made up of men who had lost their families in this area and were then basically now on the victorious side. And he explained this to myself and the other journalists that were there. And basically, as we were leaving, he just collapsed against the tree. He survived the war. He remarried, had a family. I got to see him a few more times, and so he was not in incredible shape, but his life was moving along.
Just amazing.
This is New Yorkers on the Staten Island ferry, seeing about 4 days after 9/11, seeing the remains. There's still smoke.
Yeah.
It's still smoking, seeing it for the first time in real life. And this photograph is from the election night of Kamala Harris in Pennsylvania, as they are learning and understanding that she's not going to be president. We just had the anniversary for this. This is the statue of Saddam Hussein in Baghdad. This is, kind of a story that basically encapsulated the future foreign policy of America with Iraq. These are Marines who were asked by the Iraqis to help them pull down the statue of Saddam, but because they weren't able to do it by themselves. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, one of the soldiers took the American flag and put it over Saddam's face. And the story goes that this was being broadcast live on television, that as soon as the White House saw him doing that, they picked up the phone, but it was too late. They said, get that flag off of the face. And this is where the Americans basically went for their basically few hours. Baghdad is falling as this picture is being taken, from being liberators to being occupiers,
right,
where the photograph basically represents that, but actually becomes a representative for that what was about to occur for the next 9 years or so.
You remind me a little bit of Zelig. You somehow keep showing up, and you're exactly where you need to be at every single moment. All of you guys.
This is my buddy, the shaman. So we actually entered the Capitol together, because who wouldn't want to go with him? And it was quite a remarkable scene. There's only a small number of us that were actually in this room, and the Capitol Police were incredibly calm and were able to kind of push them slowly out, because while they were doing this is right after Officer Goodman kind of stopped them from going up a different stairwell. They were able to evacuate the vice president and the other people. But this is definitely the beginning of something. I got to spend some time with the president of Ukraine. This is in his bunker, probably about a month or so into the Russian invasion in 2022. Quite a remarkable man. had a few experiences meeting men of his caliber. Spent some time with President Clinton and also with Nelson Mandela. There's certainly leaders that kind of emulate this incredible idea of what you have a leader to be, and I think that he definitely has done a remarkable job.
Well, we're actually down exactly to the second at the end of our 45 minutes. I want to thank you all so much. As I said, we could have had this conversation, and I wanted to have time for the audience, but too much to cover. Anyway, thank you guys.